Good day, elegant monkeys. Today we are looking at a. I think this is a pretty damn good bait. I mean, it's as good as it can be. Let's get into it. Straight in. By the way, my name is Mimi the Token Chef. Let's do it.
The world could go on a gold standard. You don't need governments, right? And it doesn't have to be centralized.
It hasn't outperformed anything. It hasn't outperformed commodities at large. And since Bitcoin's existed, Bitcoin's outperformed everything. The country is proposing a strategic reserve where what if people like Peter don't understand this asset at all and are wrong? It actually
strategic for what? What do we need it for? I can understand a strategic petroleum reserve in case we run out of petroleum. How are we going to run out of Bitcoin? Nobody needs it.
The issue.
We have to give Peter some credit here. We have to show some respect to Peter. He's been in the game a long time. He's brought a lot of good information forward. And his perspective on Bitcoin has, I have to think that he either is just unaware and doesn't understand it, or he's completely denying it, trying to just sell gold. I don't know what he's trying to do. But after this debate, I think it is clear his knowledge level and whether this is all, whether he's just a, what would I say? What's that thing called? Yeah. We have to give Peter some credit. We have to give Peter some respect, some well-due respect. He's been in the game a long time. He's brought some very good information forward. He's helped educate a lot of people. And, you know, his debating or his perspective on Bitcoin, I think we got to give him some leeway whether he just doesn't understand about it. I think let's just fucking just drop all that shit. So before we get into this, we have to give Peter some. Before we get into this, we have to give Peter some. Before we get into this, we have to give Peter his due respect. He's been in the game a long time. He's educated a lot of people about hard money and freedom. So he gets points automatically. Not automatically, but he gets some respect points and some, like, I'll give you some leeway, Peter. But there's like, at this point, you have to think, does Peter just not understand Bitcoin and never will? Or is he truly just denying this information just because he's trying to sell gold? And I think by the end of this debate, you will have a clear, or at least I have a clear perspective on this situation. Let's get into it.
Of how to invest our money in tumultuous and volatile times is a perennial discussion. We'll be talking about what is the best, if any, alternative to the dollar. We'll be talking about de-dollarization trends, the future of our economy, and where Bitcoin and gold may be headed in the coming election cycle. We'll be talking to two titans of their respective spaces, Peter Schiff, Chief Market Strategist of Euro Pacific Asset Management, and Jack Mallers, CEO and founder of the crypto firm Strike. Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome to both of you individually. It's a great honor to have both.
Just to give you a heads up, so Peter does Euro Pacific Capital, which is a stock you can buy, which does, he has a couple different stock options. One is mostly focused on metals. One is focused on international countries, not putting your money into America. I do hold some of his metal, which has not done well for the last 7 years or something. And Jack has a Strike app, which is a place to buy, sell, and transfer Bitcoin and using the Lightning Network, which is doing super well, apparently.
Here at the same time, speaking to my audience to discuss these very important investment issues. Welcome.
Oh, hey, David, thanks for having me on. How you doing, Jack? Nice to meet you.
I'm good. I will say, Peter, I told you offline, I definitely don't agree with everything you stand for, but I have a deep admiration and a lot of respect for what you stand against. And
exactly.
I grew up watching your stuff, and so I'm really appreciative for your work, and I'm looking forward to talking Bitcoin.
Well,
Bitcoin
I have
gold.
a feeling that there's only one thing that you disagree with me about, and that's Bitcoin. And there may not be anything else. So we'll see.
Yeah. And thanks for putting it together, David.
Well, we're going to be talking about both what Peter stands for and against, to have a discussion about that. Peter, let's start with you. Elon Musk recently tweeted, "I have never been materially active in politics before, but this time I think civilization as we know it is on the line. If we want to preserve freedom and a meritocracy in America, then Trump must win." You responded with the following tweet: "I agree Trump must win, but even if he does, the U.S. is facing a U.S. dollar and sovereign debt crisis. The inflation we've experienced so far under Biden will be even worse under Trump. Electing him is not a panacea, but it's much better than the alternative. Okay, so two things I want to unpack. Why is inflation going to be much worse under?
Peter knows what he's talking about. He's always been talking about inflation. He's always been talking about money printing. He talks about hard money. It's just so weird why he's never adopted Bitcoin or understand it. It's so bizarre.
Than under Trump, or under, I guess, a hot Harris victory? And second, why are we facing a U.S. sovereign debt crisis?
Well, first of all, it's going to be worse under Harris as well. It's not just Trump. It's just that whoever is elected, I think the inflation problem is going to grow larger over time. And that's because all of the factors that are driving inflation are going to get worse. We're going to have much larger deficit spending over the next 4 years than we've had over the prior 4 years. I mean, that's
True.
just a trend. We have an explosion in entitlements, which...
Although I guess the Doge, Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, could help with that. It'll decrease spending, but we're still going to be spending a lot of money we don't have.
Candidate wants to touch. In fact, Donald Trump wants to increase Social Security because he wants to stop taxing it. That's the same thing as an increase in benefits. But nobody is going to do anything about interest on the national debt, which is spiraling out of control. Now it's over $1 trillion a year. It's the third biggest line item in the budget, more than national defense. But in another year or two, it's going to be bigger than Social Security and Medicare. And again, those expenses are going to be growing. So the pressure on the Fed to return to quantitative easing in an even bigger way than it's done in the past is going to be extreme. And so I think...
If you're unaware, quantitative easing just basically means print money. It's not exactly printing money, but basically. So the Fed is going to be printing money because they have no other choice. Or they let America default, which they're not going to do.
The inflation, which is basically quantitative easing, it's printing money to monetize government deficit spending.
Right.
We're going to have bigger deficits under either Trump or Harris. And the Fed is going to create even more inflation to finance them. And the dollar is going to go lower. You know, we're already at a 13-year low against the Swiss franc, about 7% away from an all-time record low. The dollar is going to start breaking down against other fiat currencies. Gold at an all-time record high, above 2,500, getting ready to move quite a bit higher. So these are early signs that the Fed's upcoming rate cut is a policy mistake. In fact, the Fed stopped hiking too soon. It should have hiked rates more, but it stopped because the banks started to fail. Not because it won the battle against inflation, but because the collateral damage in the financial sector was too great. And it's going to be great in the government, in corporate America, households. So you're going to see more impetus to lower rates, despite inflation rising and ultimately making new highs. So it's unfortunate. And I wish people didn't regard Trump as a panacea. You can't just elect him and all of a sudden America is going to be great again. In fact, he didn't make America great the first time he was president.
This is true, but it's also not true, too, because everything is based on emotion and narrative. And if people believe Trump is going to make America better, just the belief alone can help to make America better. But there is just math, too. I mean, you can't fight the math.
Budget deficits got bigger. The trade deficits hit record highs. So Trump did nothing in his first term to really turn the tide. And I'm hopeful, but not... I don't expect him to do anything different in his second.
Okay, I'll come back to some of those points in just a minute. I'll give Jack a chance to give his economic outlook. I want to read this tweet you made, Jack, a few weeks ago. Gold's performance right now is telling, you said on Twitter, X. It's clear the U.S. debt and fiscal position is beyond the tipping point. Rising rates, bullish hard assets. Falling rates, bullish hard assets. What is the market saying? Either way, the only way out is monetary expansion and inflation. So I think... similar thoughts as Peter's, but I'll let you expand on what you wrote there.
Yeah, no, I don't need to take up too much of our time. I generally agree.
Yeah.
I think anyone in debt traditionally has two options. You can either pay it back or default.
Yep.
The catch-22 with the U.S. government and anyone that issues their own nation-state currency is they can print and debase the thing that they owe. And so we know mathematically the government can't afford its debt. And we know that the United States defaulting as the world reserve currency is not an option. And so
I don't know how old Jack is, but he is a smart young man, dude. This guy knows what's up.
they have to debate.
But basically, if you didn't understand that, America owes dollars. but we make the dollars. So we can just print the dollars we need to pay back the debt. But of course, it will destroy the currency. So we're in a hard place right now, but America's in a better place than pretty much every other country. So we lead the way. We're the best of the worst.
The currency, it's their only way out is through. They have to print. And the financial markets are saying as much, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Interest rates have gone up. Gold is up. Bitcoin's up. Stock market's up. When interest rates were zero and we were living through COVID inflationary times, Bitcoin up, stock market up, gold up. So I think we're past the point where I honestly don't even think Jerome Powell matters as much. I think
Yes.
he maybe did up until, COVID, but right now it's Janet Yellen. I think we're living in some early form of fiscal dominance, and clearly there's dollar liquidity. Even though we've had the fastest rate hike ever, they've tripped up banks. You've seen gold, Bitcoin, and U.S. stock markets all make highs within the last few years. So I agree with everything Peter said. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll let you comment on gold and Bitcoin first. So gold, your outlook for gold. Peter Schiff, let's start with Peter. This graph shows the breakdown of the positive correlation between gold ETF holdings and the price of gold. This is a tweet you made just 2 days ago. The breakdown stated in 2022 and really went negative starting in late 2023. It only recently turned back positive. This means the gold rally is about to gain momentum. Can you elaborate more on what you found here with that chart and generally just give us your outlook on gold?
Yeah, well, first of all, historically,
let's look at that chart again. What the hell is that chart? The graph shows a breakdown of the positive correlation between gold ETFs holdings. Oh, I see. The gold ETF holdings and the price of gold. The breakdown started in 2022 and really went negative starting in late 23. Oh, I see what he's saying. So the blue line is the price of gold, and the yellow line is the price of a gold ETF, aka just like gold paper gold, not real gold. This is gold you're going to trade in the stock market, which is easily manipulated. So this whole time they've been correlated. As the price of gold goes up, the ETF goes up. And then we had divergence here. Physical gold starts pumping and fake gold starts dumping. But now that this turn is occurring, he is thinking now that the gold bull is really going to be moving because the fake gold is going to help give it momentum to the real gold. So he's saying that this is just the start of the bull run. Now I understand.
Made just 2 days ago. The breakdown stated in 2022 and
the
really
reason,
went negative
hold
starting in
on,
late 2023.
The reason why like the gold ETF, people say it's paper gold or fake gold, is because basically it's just a piece of paper that says that people write like 1 ounce of gold on, or really like 1,000 ounces of gold on. So the people that control that paper can just write anything they want. It's not easily trustable. It's not easily verifiable. We're trusting the paper producers that they are actually truthful with the amount of gold they have. So if just as an example, if they have a safe, they have 1,000 ounces of gold, they can just say they have 5,000 ounces of gold and sell those 4,000 ounces of gold that they don't truly have to knock down the price or to increase the price, vice versa, either way. So real gold bugs, real money people, real metal people, they don't trust ETFs. They don't buy paper. They buy true physical gold.
Only recently turned back positive. This means the gold rally is about to gain momentum. Can you elaborate more on what you found here with that chart and generally just give us your outlook on gold?
Yeah, well, first of all, historically, at least going back to the formation of the gold ETFs, the price of gold and the assets under management of the gold ETFs have gone in a positive correlation with one another. As the price
Meaning
of
that they
gold
match
goes
each
up,
other.
more people want to buy. And so there's more money that's coming into these ETFs. And the converse, when gold starts to pull back, people get nervous and they sell. And so as the price of gold goes down, there's net liquidations out of the gold ETFs. Well, that all broke down, started kind of in 2022, but really kicked into gear in late 2023, where we saw an almost parabolic, rise in gold. Gold went up 25% in a short period of time. But
it's so funny to think parabolic 25% rise where we see 25% pumps and dumps in crypto daily. It's just a totally different market. So you have to be ready for crypto.
The same period of time, we saw record outflows from the gold ETFs. And I think not a coincidence, they really started to pick up in January of this year when all the Bitcoin ETFs launched. And I thought that maybe there were a lot of people, ETF investors, who were making the switch. They were selling gold ETFs and buying the Bitcoin ETFs. But I thought that was a great contrarian indicator, because when retail is selling it's generally a bullish indicator. But the question is, if you had all these retail investors selling their gold, why'd the price go up so much? Somebody was buying, and it was the institutions, mainly foreign central banks, that were buying the gold that retail investors were selling. And interestingly enough, I tweeted out today, since those
all right, what he's saying basically is that when people that are buying an ETF are buying an ETF because they want it to be easy and they don't want to hold the gold. They don't want to deal with actual physical custody of the gold, and they want to be able to get in and get out. So typically ETFs would be for a trader or someone who doesn't have this place to hold gold or doesn't want to pay for vault fees. So he's saying that the retail investor who was holding gold ETFs, his thought was that they were selling the gold ETFs to get into a Bitcoin ETF or to get into Bitcoin itself, which for him, he thought that was bullish because you're trading against retail, which is intelligent sometimes. But with the gold price going up, what truly is happening is that central banks around the world are buying gold and countries are buying gold. That is a truthful statement. So that should give you some indication. I don't know why people are still so oblivious to that, but the banks do care about gold and people are getting ready for something, or at least the big people are getting ready for something.
Came public about the second week of January. Since the opening trade, they're up about 16.5%, but gold's up 24% during the same time period. And if you actually look, even though Bitcoin made a new nominal record high this year in dollars, it never made a new high in gold. The high for Bitcoin priced in gold was still back in 2021. And we're more than 30% below that high now.
I'm sure that's
about
broken
3
by
years
now.
later. So I think the tide has already turned, where Bitcoin is going to continuously lose value measured in the price of gold. And especially
for the record, Peter Schiff has been calling for Bitcoin to go to zero for 13 years. Okay. He says the same thing over and over and over again.
When you look at the market cap, because gold has added a tremendous amount of market cap.
But we give
this
respect
year,
to the man and his father.
How much larger the market
His father
cap
did a lot of good
was.
things
So
about
it's
free
gonna be
market
very
principles
elusive. I hear
too.
a lot of people, Bitcoin thinks that, Bitcoiners think that it's going to overtake gold's market cap when it's actually been falling further and further behind in market cap related to gold over these past 3 years. Despite all the hype, all the ETFs, MicroStrategy with Michael Saylor, El Salvador ETFs, all this stuff, Super Bowl ads, massive conferences, they still can't get Bitcoin to make a new high.
Jack, I'll let you respond, but just to jump off of Peter's point here, this is a chart of Bitcoin, and I'm going to overlay it with a chart of gold. So Bitcoin is the bar chart, gold is the purple line in this particular.
So this is at the point where Bitcoin is sitting at 56,000. So how long ago was this? A few months ago. And now Bitcoin's 100. So Peter's point is now mute. It doesn't matter. Although Peter will, I'm sure if you ask Peter today, he would say it's a bubble. I never expected the bubble to get this big. Bubbles can get bigger than I expect, blah, blah, blah. But that's where we stand now. So this chart doesn't matter or doesn't support Peter's claim any longer.
Over the past 1 year.
Oh, but if you can see the candlesticks right here, this is Bitcoin's chart, the candlestick, the red line is gold. So gold is now higher than Bitcoin in relation.
You've seen somewhat of a close correlation. Recently, as of the beginning of August, we're seeing more of a divergence as Bitcoin trails down and gold has been trailing up. So I'll let you comment on, first of all.
What is that gap? Where did that gap happen? What chart is that? CME?
Historical price performance in the past 12 months, and then your outlook for Bitcoin.
Well, if you were to zoom out that same chart, David,
Sure.
Bitcoin also, so I got one pulled up as well. Bitcoin made a local high when priced in gold in late 2013. It entered what Peter's calling a gold bear market all the way until 2017, where it hit smashing new highs. That was a 3-year gold bear market Bitcoin was in. It then made another smashing high in December of 2017. It remained in what Peter describes as a gold bear market up until 2020, where it made new smashing highs. And so now we're in what Peter's describing, another gold bear market for another 3 years, where I see no evidence as to why Bitcoin won't continue to smash and make new highs. And then maybe some years down the road, I'll be on a call just like this, and Peter will say it will enter another gold bear market. You can't call an asset over a 3-year period, such a short time frame, a bear market, when over its history, it's continuously outperformed gold over and over and over again. To me, that looks like adoption cycles. That doesn't look like a bear market. I think for my case for Bitcoin, in my opinion, it's the best money in human history. It's for very fundamental purposes of the properties that we want in a money. For one, it's the scarcest money in human history. It's the only monetary asset of all time that has a fixed supply. It's the most portable asset of all time. It's the only monetary asset that you can teleport over a communications channel like the internet. It's the most divisible asset of all time. It can measure an asset that's the size of a grain of sand. It can also measure assets the size of sports franchises. It is infinitely divisible because it is bytes of.
Okay, if you're unaware or you don't think of it this way, but that money is a technology, and all the Bitcoin people will say, just as Jack is saying now, is that Bitcoin is the best money technology that we've ever had. One being because it is the most scarce asset ever. Because Bitcoin, we know that there's only 21 million, and there will only ever be 21 million, unless, of course, the entire chain comes to consensus to raise that number. I don't think that would ever happen. But with gold being probably the second best money we've ever had, gold is still found all over the earth at different times, and there's no telling when we may find a new deposit. And also, once we start becoming a space-bearing, I was going to say space-bearing nation, but I guess a space-bearing race, there's going to be comets and planets all over that are filled with gold. So that will fuck up our monetary system. That's why Bitcoiners believe that it is so much better than gold in that way. When he's saying it's transferable, you can send Bitcoin across the planet to anyone with just your cell phone. All you need is electricity and internet to send it. You can't do that with anything else. And you need no permission to do that. And also that it's divisible. Although there are 21 million Bitcoin, a Bitcoin you can cut into 100 million pieces. So at the smallest piece of a Bitcoin, one Satoshi, that sort of number could be used for very small increments. That's why I'm saying a grain of sand. Like, you can use Bitcoin to trade or to buy tiny things or big things. Although at this moment, tiny things are not worth the fees that would cost you. Although, you know, with what Jack is working on, the Lightning Network, that will be solved at some point.
It's durable, it's portable, it's actually censorship resistant to governments and central parties.
Right. You need no permission to use it. Gold, if you're in a country, you can't leave with gold, depending on the country, and a lot of countries. So Bitcoin is better in that way.
Gold, unfortunately, is not.
True.
And so to me, Bitcoin has been the most performant asset since it's been invented in human history. If you don't.
This is why there are Bitcoin maxis. This is why they're like our Bitcoiners, because they believe in the money. They believe in the aspects of Bitcoin and that the world is broken because the money is broken. And if we fix the money, we fix the world. That's why Bitcoin has such a strong community and culture to it, more so than any other crypto.
Take the early number bias. Over the last decade, Bitcoin has an average annual return of around 60%. Gold has an inflation adjusted return of annually around 2% over that same duration. So I think Bitcoin is better money. I think money's compete over monetary policy, and I expect Bitcoin to continue to do what it's already done.
Okay, Peter, I'll let you respond. Bitcoin is better money. What's your response to that?
Well, first, a few points. Gold over that time period was going sideways because you forget from 2001.
It is true for Jack to say that gold has only grown over 2%. It's not a fair statement. Gold market is heavily manipulated. So I can't agree with that. If you go back to gold from, I don't know, the 1800s, we've had quite a rise.
2011, gold went from 270 to 1900. So
there
it
you
had
go.
a huge move really before Bitcoin came on the scene.
2007? Was it that short ago that we had that much of a pump? Holy shit. Wow.
And then kind of digested that move for a while, and it's only recently broken out, and that's why it's starting to go up. But if you want to look at 3 years and say that's too short a time frame for Bitcoin, we have to look at the long term. Well, Bitcoin doesn't really have a long term. It's only been around, 12, 13 years. So you're talking about, 25% of the history of Bitcoin when you're talking about 3 years. But also, you can't ignore all of the hype that's occurred in the past 3 years that should have driven Bitcoin much higher. In fact, if you go and look at what all the Bitcoin bulls were saying a year ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago about where Bitcoin would be, nobody thought it would be this low. I mean, everybody was talking about crazy numbers. And so it's been very disappointing from that respect. Now, getting back to your idea that Bitcoin is the greatest money.
I think that's really only for traders. I mean, it's kind of for everybody too, but true Bitcoiners, people that are really in, they don't care. They just stack. They just want to get as much Bitcoin as they possibly can. And the lower the number, the more Bitcoin they can buy. So if they are financially comfortable, then they prefer a lower price so they can stack as much as possible.
Ever been invented. I don't think it qualifies as money at all, because money has to be the most marketable commodity, and the commodity has to have value unto itself, and Bitcoin has none. Bitcoin is used to exchange.
But this is not true what he's saying, though, because money has to have value unto itself. How about every government currency? I mean, if you just want to say that gold and silver are the only true monies in the world, okay, that could be your argument. And he may be saying that, and I know there's a lot of metalheads who will say that. But, you know, the majority of the planet will think that their government currency is money, even though it has no value.
Could speculate on it and buy it, and maybe somebody else will pay a higher price. But apart from that, it's not used for anything the way money is supposed to be, like gold is. But, you know, I'm surprised that you don't recognize this, Jack, but with the internet and with blockchain or without blockchain, gold can actually function as much better money than it ever has in the past. And it did a pretty good job for hundreds or thousands of years, because you could take gold, you could tokenize it, and now I could divide it.
Oh, Peter, shut up. Of course, it can be better money than it was in the past, but it's still not as good as Bitcoin.
Into tiny little specks. I can send it across the world as quickly. In fact, I can send it faster than I can send Bitcoin. I can send it for less money than I can send Bitcoin. So we could use gold as the basis of a digital monetary system that is much better than when gold was the basis of a paper monetary.
What Peter is, I know Peter is smart, man. I know he must be just denying this. Like, I don't know what's going on in his brain, or there's something broken. The big difference is that we are trusting somebody who has the gold in the vault, that they, whatever, when they're tokenizing it, they're actually moving it. Or if they said they're moving 1,000 ounces to Germany, that those 1,000 ounces are actually being put somewhere else in the vault and not used again. The point of Bitcoin is you don't have to trust anybody. That's the big difference here, dude.
System. And remember, before governments issued paper currency, private companies issued their own note currency backed by gold. In fact, going back to the old blacksmith and a warehouse receipt, people found that it was easier to negotiate a receipt for gold than go to the blacksmith and actually get their gold. And so you could do the same thing, especially with your company. You can make it very easy for people to transfer ownership of gold. The gold itself doesn't have to go anywhere. All that has to go is the ownership. And so if ownership can be transferred.
Right. We'll just give all the gold to the government, and we'll just trust them that they're going to be honest about it. Or maybe we'll give it all to the banks and trust them that they're going to be honest about it. It's so weird. Anyway, all right.
To buy something as small as a pack of chewing gum or a football franchise, you can do that with gold. So, but gold is much more stable than Bitcoin, and it's actually a store of value, because gold actually has value to store. Bitcoin has no value, it only has a price. And price is very volatile, and price can collapse. And so everything you like about Bitcoin, you can replicate with gold and actually have a real solution to the problem that you're hoping to solve.
Before we continue with the interview, I want to tell you a little bit about a great platform for executing your trades.
Thanks.
If you don't mind, I'm just
Up to $9.99 per U.S. stock. Up to $9.99 per U.S. stock trade. Moomoo offers a significantly lower fee of just $1.99. Make sure to use the link below to take advantage of these bonuses now.
Thanks.
Okay, Jack, can you respond to Peter's claim that, Bitcoin is not money for the reasons he stated?
Yeah, there's a lot in there. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to march my way through all those claims. I knew Peter wouldn't like the data I present because it doesn't act in gold's favor. So I came with a lot of data. So I did come, Peter. I know you too well, man. I grew up watching your stuff. I did come with from January 1971 till.
And he's been saying the same thing for the last 13 years.
2024.
So
I took
it's
this most recent
pretty
March.
easy to debate
Gold's
him if you're
average
ready.
annual returns is 7.9%. So you're right. It is higher than the two, but it's still less than basket of commodities at an average of 8% and far less than US stocks at close to 11%. So gold, well, I don't know
Well,
what you
stocks are an investment. Stocks pay dividends. They generate income. I don't compare gold to stocks. I compare gold to the euro, to the dollar, to the yen. And so it's outperformed fiat currencies. But yes, it hasn't outproduced income, producing assets. Now, of course, there are some stocks that have gone bankrupt.
It hasn't outperformed anything. It hasn't outperformed commodities at large. And since Bitcoin's existed, Bitcoin's outperformed everything. Gold hasn't.
Yes,
So
I agree. I grant you that.
Yeah, and that's not a fair statement, though. You're not buying gold for the outperformance. You're buying gold for safety and security. Although gold and silver might have its moment in the next couple of years if we default and you get an extreme overnight pump, which may be happening. We'll see.
Nothing that Bitcoin hasn't outperformed. And that will be true. By the way, if next year Bitcoin is down at 10,000, that will still be true. Bitcoin would have still outperformed everything, but most people who own it will have lost almost all their money. So, what good is that going to be?
Okay, so the point of that is just to show that I'm not handpicking data. All data that you want to pick for gold does not act in gold's favor. It does not promote the ideas that Peter embodies.
Gold's not an investment.
Data's bad for gold.
So gold's not an investment.
Hold on, Peter. I'll let you finish. This is embarrassing for both of us if we're shouting over each other.
I agree with Peter here,
David,
though.
the real problem with gold is that, unfortunately, it has to centralize.
Yes.
The problem is that gold can't achieve transaction finality without the help of a government or a central party.
Yes.
Meaning that when gold was operating in a local economy and you can exchange the physical coins with your direct counterpart for your butcher, your local tailor, your grocer, whoever you were exchanging with, gold was great. When the world needed to scale an economy and the velocity of money larger than your local economy, gold failed us. Gold failed us because gold is just a bare physical metal. It does not carry a monetary network. What's the gold network? The gold network are human beings. And when you're trying to transact in an economy of billions of people globally, you are reliant on central parties, banks, governments. And it was for that reason that gold failed. And it failed in a way that you can't operate a truly free market when the concentrated supply is with those that you have to trust. And so that's fundamentally what Bitcoin solved.
100%. 100%. Let's see how Peter responds to that. He's definitely not going to.
Scarce bearer instrument and a network that can achieve finality in transactional settlement without the reliance on any government.
Just to clarify too, when he's saying Bitcoin has a network, Bitcoin is a network. It is a monetary, what do we say? Like a communications network, but actually sends monetary things. Where gold has no network. There is no network for gold. You want to move gold, you got to put it in a freaking airplane and fly it there. And then you have to deal with pirates or somebody trying to shoot you down if they know you're moving a lot of gold. Someone's going to try to steal it.
Party. So that, I think, is extremely, that's really the core issue of why gold's been demonetized since. I think on the points of...
I also think it's not fair, though. Gold has been demonetized because of fake paper gold trading. They've held the price down. So yeah, there's some truth and some not the full answer too.
Bitcoin, like needing more history and it's young. I mean, I think that sounds like a personal problem for you, Peter. Like that, I think you need more evidence. And that's you being slow to recognize reality, right? Like if you were to need the internet to prove that email is better than traditional mail, you would just be late to adopting better technology. That doesn't sound like, that's not a point or a criticism against the properties that Bitcoin has. That's your own personal bias of how much proof that you need to adopt something that might be superior. So that's on you. And the last thing I will say on Bitcoin's volatility, for the listeners, I really think it's an important fundamental point. Risk is not the same thing as volatility. Risk refers to the probability of a permanent loss of capital. Risk would be that the Bitcoin code or the Bitcoin network outright fails. You can make an argument that Bitcoin's actually the least risky asset ever because it's the only asset you can store in your head. Bitcoin is, however, extremely volatile. And I will admit
that's a very interesting point. What he's saying is volatile is just the price. So there's a very low risk of Bitcoin breaking down, depending on your opinion. So in his argument that Bitcoin is low risk but high volatility. So as long as you are just holding, you can sit through all the volatility, and you want the volatility because if you want price appreciation, you need volatility. That's how it works. That's an interesting point.
But that's a pro. Volatility is the frequency or like the magnitude of which the price fluctuates.
Yeah.
And so Bitcoin, hold on. I'm almost done. I promise. 30 seconds. The point here, David, is that Bitcoin has to be volatile because the asset is inelastic. Because the asset cannot, with more demand in Bitcoin, you cannot make more supply. More demand has to fundamentally be a higher price. Whereas for all other commodities and all other assets, with more supply, you can make more demand, which makes them less volatile, but also makes them, I mean, I just went over the returns in the data, which also makes the returns not nearly what we're seeing in Bitcoin. So Bitcoin volatility is baked into the system because it's a fixed asset. So as it becomes adopted as a money globally, volatility is implied, but volatility is also the only reason that Bitcoin's averaging 100% year over year growth over the last decade, and gold's at 2%. So, and volatility is not risk.
That's very good. So if you miss that, it's like where we're always looking at the Fed of whether they're going to raise or lower interest rates. They can help to adjust the supply of dollars depending on the market, whether they want the price of a dollar to go up or down. But Bitcoin, regardless of the demand, cannot be increased or decreased. There is a fixed amount, and there's a fixed minting schedule, or not inflation schedule, I guess minting schedule would be the word. So regardless of how many people want it or not, there's the Bitcoin, the number of Bitcoin stays the same, and the schedule which Bitcoin come out stays the same. So as the demand increases for Bitcoin, there is no solution except price go up. Or in the same inverse way, the amount of people that don't want to use it, the price will go down. So that's cool.
Because Bitcoin's volatile, it doesn't make it risky. It makes it an opportunity.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Well, you could rewrite the laws of finance, but by definition, volatility is a measure of risk. I mean, if something is very volatile, there's a lot of risk when you hold it because it may drop a lot. I mean, and that precludes it from functioning as a viable medium of exchange.
I mean, I guess you could say the risk is dependent upon your time frame. If you're trying to hold it for a month or 2 months and it's volatile, yes, it's risky. But if you are a Bitcoiner and planning to hold, if this is a long-term investment, 5, 10 years, 20 years, then you could say that there's no risk, not no risk, but low risk compared to holding another currency or investment.
Account. There's just too much volatility for Bitcoin to actually work as a currency. But I think the risk is actually tremendous for people that hold Bitcoin. I mean, yeah, there's also potential that it could go up and you could get out before it collapses. But I think what you're really overlooking about gold is that gold didn't fail for the reasons that you stated. The reason it got demonetized over time was that politicians didn't want gold because gold stood in the way of their grandiose schemes to buy votes. I mean, gold keeps government honest. It's like the chaperone at the high school prom. But the kids want to get rid of the chaperone because they want to do stuff that the chaperone won't allow. So in order for governments to promise something for nothing and to run big deficits and create inflation, they needed to sever the link between their currencies and gold. And so that's what happened. It wasn't that gold didn't work. Gold worked great. That's why they had to get rid of it so they could do things that gold prevented it from doing. But
I don't disagree with that.
Let Peter finish 1 second.
Let me finish. The world could go on a gold standard. You don't need governments, right? And it doesn't have to be centralized. You can have thousands, hundreds of thousands of independent, privately owned parties that store gold and that issue tokens backed by gold, just like you have 20,000 cryptocurrencies backed by nothing. You can have 20,000 cryptocurrencies backed by something, backed by gold, which would actually give them real value, and then they could be used. But I will agree with you on one thing, that yes,
that's still centralized. You're still depending on the 20,000 individual gold holders. And you as an individual can't tokenize your own gold. So it's still centralized. It may be less centralized than governments holding it, but it still centralizes.
Aspect of Bitcoin is that you don't need any counterpart, any third party to store the Bitcoin, which is ironic because now so many people are buying their Bitcoin through ETFs, which defeats the whole purpose of the Bitcoin in the first place. But I agree. Yes, you and I can transact in Bitcoin. I can send you my Bitcoin, assuming I had any, which I don't. But if I did, I can send them to you. You can send me some, and that's it. No third party has to verify it. There's no custodian that we have to worry about. But what we do have.
Here's a key moment where I believe Peter Schiff is disingenuous. That is a very valuable thing that you do not need anyone to verify, that a person can send to another person with no intermediary, with no centralized authority. That is a valuable thing. And you will see, whether it's this debate or any debate you hear with Peter, he will always say that Bitcoin has no value whatsoever, even though that alone is a valuable thing.
About is something that's much riskier, and that is that the confidence in Bitcoin collapses, and there goes the price, because Bitcoin derives its value from the same way that fiat currency does. It's a belief system. People have to have confidence that people will want it in the future. And if that confidence goes away, then the price crashes. That is a big risk. I would rather take the risk that the counterparty goes bad, because people trust counterparties. That's part of capitalism. It's the beauty of capitalism. You have reputations, you compete for reputations. If people couldn't use counterparties, there'd be no insurance industry. All insurance is based on a counterparty risk. I buy life insurance, I buy fire insurance, auto insurance, health insurance. It's all based on the belief that the counterparty is going to pay the claims, and they work, right? This industry functions well, and so a monetary system based on gold functions well. The fact that you have to trust somebody, that's no big deal. People have been trusting people to hold their gold for centuries, and it works. What I don't want to trust is that a digital string of meaningless numbers that somebody wants to buy today because they think somebody else will pay a higher price. I don't want to put my confidence that that's going to last, that that's more than just
because somebody's going to pay a higher price. How about people are buying it today because they believe it's the best money, because of the evidence brought to them? It's not just about speculation. Bitcoiners actually believe that. There are other people who are speculators and traders. Yeah, I get that. But he's not including true Bitcoiners in this, who will continue to stack and continue to buy no matter what.
fad, a passing fancy that's here today and is going to be gone tomorrow.
By the way, Peter, there's internet rumors that you say you don't own any Bitcoin, that you actually own Bitcoin and you just want to talk the price down so you can buy more. Can you confirm or deny these conspiracies?
No, I owned some Bitcoin at one point that was gifted to me. I never actually bought any. And I didn't even have a whole Bitcoin. I think I had maybe 30 or 40% of a Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And the person who created the wallet for me, and that I had an address that I gave out and then I got the gifts.
Sure.
When he did that, he never told me my seed phrase or even the password. I just had the PIN. That's all I had. And I had this PIN. And then one day I woke up and the PIN didn't work. And I even contacted the company that owned the wallet. I mean, there's nothing I could do. The Bitcoin had been lost in cyberspace for years, and I'll never see him again.
So maybe that's it. Maybe he's just angry that he had bad wallet management, and maybe that's where this all comes from.
That was my one experience. But I mean, look, I at the time, I guess I didn't realize I needed all that stuff. Now I know. So I think that if I bought them again, I could take better care not to lose them.
I like to give
I have no interest in buying it.
Fair enough. I like to give each of you a counter argument based on what you've said. So starting with Jack. Jack, you've said you've highlighted the outperformance of Bitcoin versus gold and pretty much everything else over its last 13-year period. Let me present to you this counter argument. Well, you could take any other thing that has outperformed the stock markets, gold. Let's say Tesla. Tesla has greatly outperformed the stock markets in the last 5 years. It's greatly outperformed gold. Why don't we use Tesla as a form of money? Why is Tesla not a Tesla stock, not a currency? You know, we could, in theory, transport Tesla stock virtually over countries and borders. You know the point I'm making, right? It has a lot of the properties that you talked about, yet we don't consider that money. So the point that just because Bitcoin has outperformed everything else doesn't make it a better form of money. How would you respond?
I think Bitcoin's a better form of money for the properties that I initiated the conversation with. It's the most credible, neutral, scarcest asset. Scarcity is the base layer of any good, sound money. And so Tesla stock, you have a direct relationship with Elon Musk. Its value is not predicated on scarcity, on durability, on portability, on fungibility, on how saleable and liquid it is in the market. Tesla stock is not built and operated to allow neutral parties, even untrusted parties that hate each other, to perform global trade. 100%. So Bitcoin is built as a money, and it's the most performant monetary asset because it fulfills all the properties that you want as a money. I think, David, just as a reminder for the audience, money was born out of barter. Money is the market good that you acquire not to consume it, but to exchange it for something later. It's what you take your time and energy, your labor, your effort, and you trade it in so that you can acquire the things that you need in your life at a later point. And Bitcoin was designed and purpose built to fulfill that market good. That is not what Tesla stock was built for. Tesla stock is an investment. Tesla stock is equity in a business. Bitcoin is supposed to be money and the best money of all time. And according to those properties and characteristics, I don't think anything competes with it. I've never seen an argument to where in which some other asset fulfills the properties of money better than Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let me make a couple
please.
points here. First of all, scarcity in of itself doesn't mean anything. I mean, gold is not valuable because it's scarce. I mean, it has a high price because it's scarce, but its value is not from its scarcity, but from its properties as a metal, right? Gold can do things that other metals and other material can't do. And so there are a lot of places where gold is used because it adds a lot of value. But if you go back to barter, the original idea behind barter was so that when people traded, they would trade one good for another good. But in the terms of money, it wasn't a good that they necessarily needed, but it was a good that they could trade with somebody else. But ultimately, there was an end user. So when gold became money because of all the properties that Bitcoin copied, people didn't need to use gold. You didn't have to be a jeweler. You didn't have to be a computer chip maker to accept the gold. But ultimately, it was that real demand that allowed it to be money.
What was the demand for gold in the 1800s? It wasn't about electricity or computer chips. It was shiny and rare. He always brings in this like electrical component, but that's not how gold started. That's not what brought it into value in the beginning.
For example, you know, after the Second World War, or even more recently in prisons, cigarettes are money. People use cigarettes. Now, you don't have to smoke. Not everybody in jail smokes, but people will still take cigarettes as money because they know there's somebody in that jail that smokes. And so eventually, you know, you can trade it around until you get a real smoker who actually uses a cigarette. So that's what gives cigarettes value, not that they're scarce, but that you can actually enjoy smoking them. And that's why they had value.
And they are scarce in jail. That's why they have value. If they weren't scarce in jail, they wouldn't have value. Scarcity is a big part of it.
You can't smoke Bitcoin, right? You can't do anything with Bitcoin. I mean, you have to be smoking something to buy Bitcoin. So it's not real money. It fails the test that you think it passes.
Okay,
think
Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, I think is the argument. What is your response, Jack?
Well, I can't believe I'm arguing this with the Peter Schiff. All value is subjective.
That's so
David.
funny.
It's actually the fact that you can't chew your Bitcoin, put it in a jewelry kit, sponsor it in a music video is a property. It's a pro to the asset. If you had a money that had 10 total units and you were producing 1 unit per year, so that's the stock to flow ratio, the new supply dynamic. Let's just, for example's sake, if you were to take half of that total supply and you were to demonetize it and commercialize it and consume it, that makes it a worse money because now the total money supply of that monetary good is now 5, still being produced at 1 per year. So you don't want to be consuming your money. You want the money to be used for monetary purposes. Money is the market good that you
But
do
Bitcoin
not.
can't.
Hold on, Peter.
admission.
I let you finish.
Yeah.
The money is the market good, David, that you do not consume. You strictly acquire it only to save it and exchange it for things later. It is not because gold is used in Peter's cufflinks that gold is money. Gold is money because it's a hard asset that despite rampant demand, finding new supply has been more difficult. That's why silver was demonetized. So it's actually amazing that I can't put my
there are
What Jack is saying, if you missed it, is that like the idea that you can't do anything else with Bitcoin is an advantage. That's not a disadvantage because you want the money to only be money. What he was saying, if you only had 10 of a currency and you could take 5 of them and eat them, that's not a good form of money. That's a bad thing about money. And the idea that gold's a little bit different because all you're doing is wearing it as a cufflink or jewelry or whatever. So the gold doesn't actually get destroyed. And in a way, you're just kind of wearing your money. You're just storing your money. Now, I don't know about gold going in electronics. I guess it does get thrown away. Some people recycle it. At some point, people will be going in the, if gold price gets high enough, I'm sure people will be going in the dumps to go collect the gold. But so that would be a bad thing about gold is that when it goes in computer chips or anything like that, it kind of gets wasted. Although it's not destroyed, it can be recovered. But yes, that's his point.
Mercury is far more scarce than gold, yet the price is much lower because it doesn't have the use case is gold. You can't say that it has value just because it is. Its value comes from all of the things that we use it for. And the reason that gold is a store of value is because the gold that I have today, in 1,000 years, it can still be used for all the things that it can be used for today. In fact, more, because we're discovering new uses for gold all the time. And the gold that we dig out of the ground today and put in a safe can be used in 1,000 years for whatever people need gold to do. That's what gives it the value in the present. It's the future value of all that use.
But
I mean, you
no,
don't know
that's
what
not true.
Bitcoin is going to be. It's just a digital token.
Get out of here. Be gone.
There's tens of thousands of them. And who knows what new cryptocurrency, to the extent that people want to invent new ones. I mean, could you think of one example in human history where something that man made, man did not later make better? I mean, gold was made by God, right? It's here from the Big Bang. But humans created Bitcoin. And they can create something better than Bitcoin. I mean, the first airplane was not the best airplane. The first automobile was not the best automobile. The first computer was not the best computer. The first cell phone, the first television. Everything we've made it better. So to think, oh, well, Bitcoin is going to be money forever or whatever it is, well, somebody comes up with something else in the future that people like better, and then what the hell's Bitcoin work? It's nothing. It's like, it's gone.
I'm going to give one counter argument to Peter because I've done that for Jack. And then I'll let Jack respond. Peter, your claim that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, doesn't do anything, therefore the price is just, made up by the market. Can the same argument be applied to gold then? Because gold, as you know, is not in stock. It's not a company that generates cash flow. You can't DCF it. You can't model out its future projected earnings and provide an NPV. Its value is determined by the market. Is it not the same thing? How would you respond?
Well, first of all, I agree gold is not an investment. That's why I don't compare gold to stocks or real estate or anything else that is capable of generating a return. Now, in theory, you could loan out your gold and you can generate interest on the gold, just like you can loan out a bank deposit. Right?
You can do that with Bitcoin too.
To earn interest on their cash. But I compare gold, which is real money, to government-created alternatives, fiat currency, and gold is certainly better. It's a much better store of value, than any fiat currency. When the Federal Reserve was first created, you only needed $20 to buy an ounce of gold, and that's how many dollars you needed to buy an ounce of gold in 1789 when we ratified the Constitution. But once we got the federal government to print money, dollars have lost better than 99% of their value against gold. But I've heard a lot of people say, well, Bitcoin and gold, it's the same thing. It's all faith. Gold doesn't have any value either. It's just because we think it does. We believe it does. It's all subjective. And that's a bunch of nonsense. We know gold has value. It had value before it became money. If it didn't have value, it never would have become money. I mean, gold's been used for thousands of years. It was used before it was money as a commodity. But gold has undeniable physical characteristics that are unique, rare, and extremely valuable where gold is used. In fact, gold would be used a lot more if the price was lower, but it's not. It's so scarce and valuable that it is only used where it's the highest and best use. To the extent that you could substitute a different metal that's not as expensive, even though it's not as good, it'll still get the job done, and so it's more cost effective. But no, gold's value doesn't depend on what I believe. It doesn't matter what I believe. It's going to be value regardless of my opinion of it. But Bitcoin, it's all about belief and confidence. There is no real user for Bitcoin. If Bitcoin drops, there's no one that's going to say, oh, let me buy some extra Bitcoin because I need it. Like a jeweler might, or a chip company might need the gold to make their products. Nobody needs Bitcoin to make anything. I mean, you buy it because you think the price is going to go up. But if you don't think the price is going to go up, there's no reason to buy it. And everybody that owns Bitcoin is going to be selling it, right? They have to. If they want to buy stuff, they're not going to be able to buy it with Bitcoin. They're going to have to convert their Bitcoin into dollars or euros or pounds or whatever. So all the buyers are eventually going to be sellers. There needs to be new buyers to come in to make that possible. But I think that you're going to run out, just like any pyramid scheme, Ponzi chain letter. I call Bitcoin a blockchain letter. Because it's got the same characteristics of a chain letter, except
funny.
it's on the blockchain. That's what's new about it, right? It's the same old scheme that doesn't work. It's just repackaged on the internet for the modern day. And you have a lot of young, smart people like Jack. And I have a lot of respect for Jack. He's a smart kid, and not even a kid anymore, man. And he's done very well for himself. And, I appreciate that. But I think he's just got this wrong. I think there's a lot of young people, the new generation always thinks their parents don't know what they're talking about, or their great grandparents. I mean, this is happening throughout history. But I think as the young generation gets older, they'll learn from this mistake, and they'll be in my position at some point when the next fad comes around and people are saying, oh, you're just an old fogey, you don't get it. They'll remember all this, and they'll remember the things that I said, and they'll try using that same wisdom.
Okay,
gotcha, Peter.
When you get older.
Before I move on to the next topic,
they're kids.
all right. Before I move on to the next topic, I'm going to let Jack respond, and then we'll move on. So, Jack, please respond to the claim Bitcoin is like a Ponzi. Young people don't know what they're doing, but focus on the Ponzi part. Yeah.
Which claim? I mean, so much comes out of his mouth and not much. It's hard. So listen, I agree. Let me, for the audience, it's very true. Scarcity is not the sole property for a good money.
Yes.
Right? Think of a Van Gogh painting.
But it is a property.
Van Gogh painting isn't divisible. It isn't portable.
Right.
It is scarce. It's not very censorship resistant, right? So it isn't just about finding something that's definitively scarce. I said scarcity is the base layer of a sound money, but it needs to have durability, portability, fungibility. It needs to be saleable. It needs to be censorship resistant. It needs to be liquid. It needs to be all of these things. So just to be clear, I agree with Peter on that. All of his claims against Bitcoin are the same with gold. Again,
exactly. Yes.
What's the confidence that someone will value Bitcoin tomorrow? What's the confidence someone will value gold tomorrow? Gold is not used as a money because you can put it in cufflinks. Gold is used as a money for the monetary properties I just went over. So that is absolutely true. Again, value is subjective. Meaning, David, if I were to say, hand me your cell phone, I'll keep it in the physical form that that Peter values so much. So physically your phone wouldn't change, but I'm going to wipe all the data. I'm going to delete all your emails, all of your photos, all of your file storage, all of your passwords. You would probably say, no, that's a value to me. You're subjectively valuing something that's digital and isn't physically real. So that's not a real argument to make that it has to be physical and we have to be able to put it in cufflinks in order for it to be a monetary good or be of any value. If I were to say,
he's so good.
Peter,
Jack is good, man. He's ready.
I'm going to sell you a bottle of water for 50 cents. You say, okay, that sounds like a fair deal. But if I say you need this bottle of water to survive because you're so parched and it's going to cost you your entire net worth, you're going to buy the water because you want to live. So, in an economy, people make decisions at the margins. Value is subjective. What you want in a money is the monetary good that's best at being money, that's best at being the market good, to both save your money through time, your value through time, and be able to exchange your value and money through space. And so all of his arguments, they're almost like ad hominem attacks. They're not real arguments. Yes, adopting a money is an entrepreneurial endeavor for everything. You can take your labor, David, today for this podcast, and you can exchange it for a loaf of bread. You can exchange it for a Derek Jeter signature. You can exchange it for Bitcoin, gold, euros, dollars. That is your decision. And you are at risk of the market not agreeing with you.
What he's saying too is people don't understand that when you put your labor in and you get paid your money, whatever currency that is in whatever country you are, from that point, you decide how you want to store that value. You can store it in your local government currency. If you're in America, you store dollars. If you're in China, you store yen or whatever. But you don't have to store your government currency. You can store a different government currency. If I live in America and I'm getting paid in dollars, I can decide to trade those dollars for euros because I believe in that and hold euros. Or I can decide to hold Bitcoin, or I can decide to hold gold, or a mixture. We all have the freedom. I think, most people have the freedom to make that choice and to decide, hey, what do I think is the best money? What do I think has the strongest value? Hey, my currency is getting destroyed. I don't want to hold it. We all make those individual choices. So people that typically are buying Bitcoin have already made that choice and will continue to buy Bitcoin. The people that are not, the retail at the end of a bull cycle is not just buying the pump. That's a different person. Those people are just hoping to get rich in 15 minutes. But people that already understand Bitcoin, they're buying it, and they're not going to stop buying it. And the same with gold. People that understand gold, they're buying gold and they're not going to stop buying gold.
Assessment tomorrow.
We have the
That's
freedom to
true
choose.
for everything. And the last problem with Peter's
Yes.
arguments is that he's wrong according to the market. Peter and I can sit here and argue all the time, but money emerges as a market good from the free market. And the market elects the money that is best at being money. And if you look at the data historically, Bitcoin's won at being money every single year. And so like Peter can sit here and make these.
I can't agree with that. Bitcoin is one as an investment or as like a get rich quick for a lot of people. It's not money. And in every person that holds Bitcoin's mind, it's not money to them. So I can't agree with that statement.
That I'm young and that he's old, which I think is hilarious. Maybe it's why he's slower to adopting technology. But the problem is, David, that the market, which is the real judge of what the good money is, Bitcoin's been crowned every single year. So I just I don't even know how to respond to a lot of this as much as I appreciate
I know how to respond to what you just said. So, but first of all, I am making valid arguments. You're just not acknowledging it. And
no, it's not.
You talked about my bias. Well, you've got a lot of bias too. I mean, you're very biased with respect to Bitcoin, and it's almost like a cognitive dissonance that your mind is made up, and you don't want to actually acknowledge these arguments. And you can accuse me of the same thing.
What argument?
So I don't want to talk about who's stubborn or who's biased. I'm just looking.
So
at
let's
the facts.
look at the market. So what's the market saying?
I'm getting to that. So you're saying Bitcoin has won as money? No, it hasn't. It's won as a speculative asset
it has not.
that nobody uses as money. I think more companies were advertising that they accepted Bitcoin in 2017 than now. I mean, Bitcoin, nowhere do I see. I don't go into any stores. And I'm in Puerto Rico now, where there's a lot of you Bitcoiners around me. I mean, it's not like people here aren't in Bitcoin, but I don't go to any stores where they say, here, pay in Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin is not winning as money. So your argument is it's been a good performing speculative asset. I will grant you that. If you bought it a long time ago, it's been a good performing speculative asset, but it hasn't performed at all as money, not even close. People aren't using it. They're using dollars, they're using euros. People are using, you have a company with payments. I mean, your payments when people go to the store to buy stuff.
But now he's mixing up the definition of money and currency too.
They're not paying in Bitcoin, and you know that. So to say that it's won as money is just not true. But getting to your scarcity, when I talk about scarcity, yes, a Van Gogh painting is not going to function as money. But it has value. Part of the value comes from the scarcity, but most of the value comes from the fact that Van Gogh painted it. And Van Gogh is a historic figure recognized as one of the greatest painters that ever existed. I don't know how many Van Goghs exist, whether there's 100 of them, 200, I don't really know the quantity, right? But I know this, I can paint a Peter Schiff original, and it could be the only one I ever paint. It could be far more scarce than all the Van Goghs. Yet I can't sell it for hardly anything. Doesn't matter how scarce my original painting is, because who cares about a Peter Schiff painting, right? I'm not Van Gogh. So it's not just that it's scarce. It's to own a Van Gogh, to hang a Van Gogh. There's a lot of pride in that. There's a lot of enjoyment that comes out of having a very scarce, valuable painting that was painted hundreds of years ago by one of the most famous artists to have ever lived, right? There's value there among art collectors who value that. And when you have a lot of money and you got to figure out, hey, what am I going to do? I've got billions of dollars. What can I do? I'll buy some of these great works of art, and I can hang it up in my study, and I could show it to my friends or just enjoy the beauty of
it, Peter. We get it. We get it.
Level.
Let me ask you some questions, Peter.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is scarce in the sense that there's 21 million of them, but so what? It's just a string of numbers. There's nothing to look at. There's nothing that it does that's any different than all the other strings of numbers of all.
How about that you can send it to somebody else without any sort of intermediary, which he already said previous in this debate, but he's not going to acknowledge that that is valuable, that there is some value to that. Whether he thinks it's small amount of value, but it's some. You can't say it's nothing, which he's stating now.
Other cryptocurrencies. In fact, there's 22.1 quadrillion Satoshis. I mean, there's enough Satoshis for everybody to have hundreds of thousands of them. You can't do anything more with a Bitcoin than you can with a Satoshi, which is nothing. And I never said that something has to be tangible to have value. Intangible assets, software is valuable, music, all kinds of things that you can't physically touch have value because of the things that they can do and the benefits that I derive from using them. But that is not true about Bitcoin. The only benefit people hope to derive from Bitcoin is getting rich when it goes to the moon. And in order for that to happen, more people have to be foolish enough to buy it. And that's all it is. It's just an exercise in the greater fool. And yes, so far, the price is still, 56,000 or something like that. And people made money. But I think more people who own Bitcoin now have lost money than made money as far as.
I don't know if it's just me, but sometimes Peter gets so hard to listen to. Just nonstop, same shit over and over again. But I respect you, Peter. I respect you. All right, let's keep going. If you don't know, too, Peter Schiff's father was put in jail for a long time. I forget for what. Something stupid. Something dumb. I don't remember what it was. So, yeah, we got to give him some respect. But he's just sounding dumber and dumber as the years go by.
Because I think a lot of the money came in at the top, and so they're losing money. And the next big crash that's coming, and I think there is a big crash coming, especially when we get a lot of liquidations out of the ETFs. I think that's still coming. I don't think the people in the ETFs are dyed-in-the-wool hodlers. They're traders. And they're gonna take their losses and move on. And I think there's going to be a massive crash in Bitcoin when that happens. Whether that's the ultimate bottom, I don't know. Maybe there'll be a bounce. But I think Bitcoin is going to go below 20,000, probably below 10,000 when you get this big liquidation. And then almost everybody who owns Bitcoin will be down. And yes, you'll be able to make the argument that had you bought it in 2010 and 2011 or 12, you're still way ahead. But that doesn't do any good to the people who bought it in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, who bought it with real money. Most people who bought Bitcoin, back then, bought it with play money. People weren't putting their retirement savings into Bitcoin when it first showed up. But you have a lot of that's happened now. So a lot more money has been invested at much higher prices than what was invested, in the early years when the price was much lower.
Okay, Jack, you had a question, and then we have to move on.
Well, do you mind if I reply? I mean, my problem with a lot of this is Peter's painting these like doomsday scenarios. I'm trying to, no jokes, no fighting here, but it's impossible to argue with like doomsday scenarios where what if the world ends tomorrow, then everything that you know of and believe in. So, but the problem, Peter, is you've been claiming that for over a decade now, and you've been consistently wrong. So people can make their own judgments as to whether this time you're right. And I'll leave it at that, but it's hard to argue because those aren't like claims against the properties of money or anything of substance. They're just hyperbolic predictions of the future. On the value of money, again, David, the audience, money is valuable as a money if it can be scarce, if it can be durable, portable, resistant to censorship, saleable, liquid. These are the properties. If a money can achieve that. So when Peter says it has a limit of 21 million, who cares? The market cares because it is an asset that despite more and more demand, nobody can find more supply. That is insanely valuable, so valuable that it's been the most performant asset in the history of humanity. It's
but
the
not
only
money.
Asset. Hold on, Peter. It's the only asset that's been able to achieve that property, David. So again, a money doesn't need to be in a cufflink. It doesn't need to be hung on a wall. It needs to achieve the properties of a money which allow it. Now, the questions I would have for Peter.
It's got to circulate as a medium of exchange. It's got to be a unit of account. Bitcoin is none of that.
Okay, let me ask you, if Peter, does a money need to be accepted at the store? So if like Papa John's does not accept a certain asset, would you then disqualify it as money? Which would mean gold
money has to be acceptable as a medium of exchange. Yes.
Nobody takes gold.
Gold is not money either.
Right.
Gold is not being used as money today other than by central banks. Gold has been demonetized and it's mainly a commodity, but it can be accepted. I mean, I would certainly accept gold.
So can Bitcoin. So can everything else. This is such a dumb statement by him.
If somebody wanted to buy something from me and pay in gold, I'd be happy to take it. But gold is not functioning as money right now, even though it historically has been money. We've had about the last 50 years where gold has not been money ever since 1971. When Nixon, closed the gold window. But before that, gold was acting as money because it was backing up the currencies that were circulating. And what gave
you're losing right now, Peter.
Value was the money that backed it up. But right now, gold is not served as being used as money, but it's been used as money in the past. For hundreds of years or thousands of years, gold was
Peter,
money.
you're giving me a
Bitcoin
headache.
has never been used as money. It's only existed for, a little over a dozen years. But during its existence, it may have been used early on by, on the black market, Silk Road. I mean, some kind of, illicit transactions. They might have accepted Bitcoin back in the beginning, but it's not used as money. It's what you've described it. It's being held, hoarded as a speculative asset. So people buy Bitcoin the way somebody might buy Tesla stock, which you mentioned. They think the price is going to go up. Now, Tesla is an actual business that has earnings. So there's, I think, more reason to believe that Tesla might appreciate over time than Bitcoin, when Bitcoin is just based on the greater fool buying it at a higher price. But yes, there are more people today that own Bitcoin than owned it 10 years ago, right? So you've succeeded in growing the number of people who are in this casino betting on Bitcoin. But that's what they're doing. I mean, the people who own Bitcoin are not spending it, and merchants are not trying to accumulate it in exchange for their goods. Prices are not in Bitcoin, and transactions are not in Bitcoin because it doesn't work. It's too slow, it's too expensive, and it's too volatile. Right?
Okay, Jack.
And you would acknowledge all that.
Jack, hang on to that thought, please, gentlemen. I'd like to move on to the country adoption aspect. So we know what happened with El Salvador. There's been speculation that something similar could, I'm not saying will, could happen in the U.S. Trump has on the campaign trail said he wants to implement a Bitcoin strategic reserve.
Pretty interesting.
Should he be elected.
So, as the final part of my plan today, I am announcing that if I am elected, it will be the policy of my administration, United States of America, to keep 100% of all the Bitcoin the U.S. government currently holds or acquires into the future. We'll keep 100%. I hope you do well, please. This will serve in effect as the core of the strategic national Bitcoin stockpile. As you know,
I'd like to get your response to this. This is Senator Cynthia Lummis's bill, her proposed Bitcoin strategic reserve legislation. I'll just read a few bullet points from this bill. Establish a decentralized network of secure Bitcoin vaults operated by the United States Treasury. Implement a 1 million unit Bitcoin purchase program over a set period of time. Be paid for by diversifying existing funds within the Federal Reserve System and Treasury Department. Affirm self-custody rights of private Bitcoin holders and emphasize that the strategic Bitcoin reserve shall not infringe upon individual financial freedoms. Okay, I've heard pros and cons of this bill by both Bitcoin and anti-Bitcoiners. Even pro-Bitcoiners I've talked to have stood against this bill.
It wasn't brought up before with Bitcoin, with gold. Even if it's not centralized in government vaults, if it gets decentralized, as he's saying, into like 1,000 different vaults, private vaults or something, any government that starts going down or collapsing, they can just grab the gold. They can claim ownership of the gold from those individual private businesses, where that could not happen in Bitcoin with individual holders because you couldn't prove that they owned it. Yeah, that's something that needed to be brought up before.
Anyway, I'll let you comment on this, starting with Jack. What's your response?
Just like the gun confiscation or something like that. Like if a government's going down, they could confiscate gold from any vault in their own jurisdiction that they wanted to. But doing that with Bitcoin would be dramatically harder. Of course, you could do it from the centralized exchanges, but from the private citizens would be extraordinarily difficult, probably impossible.
When this came out earlier this summer?
I mean, I think it's a phenomenal idea, but I think it's a phenomenal idea because I think every individual, corporation, government should own Bitcoin. Again, if it fulfills the properties of money and it is the scarcest asset in the history of mankind, then you have a self-interest, no matter if you're a government, business, individual, or whoever, to own it. I want the United States of America to own the scarcest asset of all time before any of our counterparts, before the people that we may go to war with. Like, I have a self-interest in my country owning some slice of the 21 million. And I think it's a phenomenal idea because the other reason, David, is that Bitcoin, again, 63% year over year over the last 10 years. And if you want to go since the beginning of its history, then it's over 150%, close to 200%. What does the United States have a problem of? Not enough growth in relation to its debt, right? Debt to GDP is the metric, not just GDP. Bitcoin, you can literally buy growth off the shelf. It's ridiculous. So I want the United States to own the fastest growing market good in the history of mankind and the scarcest market good in the history of mankind. Why would I not want that for my country? So I think it's inevitability that countries will adopt it, just like it was that businesses adopted, just like it was that individuals adopted. It's only very logical. And, it's, again, markets, money emerges from the market, and people aren't stupid. Despite what anyone says on shows and TV and their biases, markets adapt to what's real and what's true. And the market listens to data and is performant based on real facts and real history. And so I think the United States is saying, man, this thing's the best performing asset in the history of mankind. We should probably have some as a strategic reserve, which is what they're calling it.
Peter, I'll let you respond to this bill. I'll leave it up in case you need to revisit some of these bullet points. Yeah. What do you think of this?
Well, I mean, it's a bunch of nonsense. I mean, first of all, businesses haven't adopted it. I mean, speculators have adopted it. Some of them, I'll grant you that. But look, I have no problem with Jack buying all the Bitcoin he wants, and I'm a free market guy. People are free to make mistakes, and if they want to buy Bitcoin, go ahead, right? But I don't want the government to buy Bitcoin with my tax money. I mean, there are a lot of people that don't believe in Bitcoin. We all pay taxes. Why should the government take our tax dollars and just decide to buy up Bitcoin? I mean, they might as well just pick up.
I can agree with that. I don't want the government using tax money, but also, I mean, the government uses tax money for much dumber things, and this might actually be a really intelligent decision. So I'd rather them use it to buy Bitcoin than something else, but I don't like the idea of government taxing people, taking their money and buying something they necessarily don't agree with. So I got some... I got Peter's perspective on this a little bit, although I think it's a good idea for them to do the strategic reserve.
Stock and buy it, as opposed to just pick Bitcoin and buy that. And of course, the government is already broke. They have to go into debt to buy Bitcoin. And it makes no sense to create more inflation to go out and buy Bitcoin. Now, I know why some people who own Bitcoin want the U.S. government to buy it. They're saying this bill requires the U.S. government to buy a million Bitcoin, right? 5% of the supply. And I know that people want that because they think that if the U.S. government comes in and buys up a bunch of Bitcoin, the price of the Bitcoin that they already own will go up. And I think this is kind of like a government bailout for Bitcoin. I mean, a lot of Bitcoiners realize that they're running out of individuals that are dumb enough to buy Bitcoin. So now let's get the politicians to do it because it's not even their money, right? It's somebody else's money. But we don't need a strategic Bitcoin reserve. There's nothing strategic about Bitcoin. We're never going to run out of Bitcoin and need to have more of it. The whole thing is nonsense. But obviously, politicians want two things. They want votes and they want money. And a lot of Bitcoiners have money thanks to the big gain. And there's a lot of them that could vote. And so it makes sense to me that politicians who care most about getting reelected, and to do that, you need money and votes, that they're going to pander to a special interest group. And I think the crypto group is a great, risk reward, because there's probably a lot of people that would be a single issue voter. Whichever side promises to buy up a bunch of Bitcoin and make me rich, just like somebody promises to forgive a student loan. If I got a lot of student loans, that's my candidate. Whoever's going to forgive my debt, they got my vote, right? If I'm a single issue voter,
I mean, I can understand
you can
his
get a lot of
perspective
votes by pandering to the Bitcoiners. But what's great about it is you don't necessarily lose any votes, because the people who don't own Bitcoin probably couldn't care less. They don't even pay attention. It's not divisive like pro-life, pro-choice, where you take a pro-life position and you lose the pro-choice. You take a pro-choice and you lose the pro-life. It's, you take pro-Bitcoin and you don't lose anti-Bitcoin. They don't even care. So it's a great issue for a politician to embrace. But I don't know, campaign promises get broken. I doubt that bill that Senator Luma introduced is ever going to go anywhere. I don't think there's going to be a Bitcoin reserve. All Donald Trump promised to do was not sell the Bitcoin that the U.S. government has. And I think before he takes office, whatever Bitcoin the government has are going to be sold by the Biden-Harris administration. So it won't even be there. So even if he wanted to hold it, it won't be there. But, I agree with what Trump said when he was president, when he said it was a scam, it was a fraud, it was a Ponzi. now that he's a candidate for president, all of a sudden, he's done the flip flop. But, a lot of other people who initially criticized Bitcoin, the minute they had a financial interest to support it, like a Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, as soon as he got paid off by Bankman-Fried, all of a sudden he liked it. And that a lot of people have been corrupted by the money. And I think, Trump, that's one of the things I disagree with Trump on, his Bitcoin stance. But, again, I recognize it for what it is.
Okay, enough, Peter, enough. I get it.
He's succeeding.
All right.
Okay, Jack, let me ask you this. Peter says he doesn't...
Real quick, David.
Sure, yeah,
I just
go ahead.
think I'm really glad you brought this up because I think it's a phenomenal example of Peter. So Peter just actually doesn't know the proposal at all. He's claiming that it would use tax dollars, but that's not the proposal. The proposal is to use excess reserves at all the Fed banks. And the reason this is such a great example is I don't think Peter understands Bitcoin or understands
a lot. That's not the proposal.
That's absolutely
the proposal is. They want to revalue the gold that the U.S. government holds from $42 an ounce to the market price, and then have the Federal Reserve print up all that extra money and give it to the government to buy Bitcoin. The source of the money to buy the Bitcoin is inflation. It's an expansion of the supply of U.S. dollars in circulation, and then
is that I heard about that. I got to do more research about that. That the gold that is held by the United States is not accurately valued. He's saying it's valued at $42 an ounce, where we're sitting at $3,000 an ounce now. I got to learn more about that. I don't know much about it.
Those dollars to buy Bitcoin. Yeah,
it's so weird. Why would it be that way?
Right. So it's not tax dollars. It's not.
Yes, it's inflation. Inflation is a tax. If the government is going to print money and use it to buy Bitcoin, it is increasing the circulation of money. I think it's creating inflation.
Peter, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, I think we're arguing semantics on taxes here, but yeah.
But everyone's going to rewind this clip and listen to that. Peter said everyone in this country pays taxes. I don't want my tax dollars. He wasn't talking about a hidden tax. So the point is,
I'm talking about the inflation tax.
Hold on, Peter. I just let you talk for a while. Let me finish. The point is, the country is proposing a strategic reserve where what if people like Peter don't understand this asset at all and are wrong? It's a strategic reserve where what if this money actually
strategic for what? What do we need it for? I can understand a strategic petroleum reserve in case we run out of petroleum. How are we going to run out of Bitcoin? Nobody needs it.
What is that a serious question? Bitcoin's the only
no, it is serious.
You can't print any more Bitcoin, so you would
run
out
of
what?
Who cares? Okay, what is the government going to need Bitcoin for?
Okay, let's answer this question directly, Jack.
Need Bitcoin for? Nobody needs.
The government could need Bitcoin to bail themselves out, or during a crash, during a default, as a way to save themselves from default. Back the dollar by gold, back the dollar by Bitcoin, back the dollar by a basket of goods: gold, Bitcoin, petroleum, something like that. There's a value to it. There's one thing the government could use it for.
Bitcoin for anything.
Why do we need a Bitcoin? Yes. Why do we need a Bitcoin strategic reserve? I think is the core of the question. Jack, can you answer that?
Yeah. Again, because it's proven to be the best performing money over the last 15 years.
It's the best performing asset.
You got that
history is so short. It means nothing.
It's going to be enjoyable for no one.
Crash tomorrow.
It's going to be enjoyable for no one if we keep talking over each other, man. We gotta. I can't be the adult in the room here. You're twice my age.
Don't worry, you're not.
The problem is. So, can I ask you then, Peter? Why does the United States own gold? Because they need to put it in a bunch of cufflinks, or for another reason?
No. Well,
why do they own it?
Own gold?
Huh?
Because ultimately, the reason they own gold is to back up the dollar. Because if there was a run on the dollar, and the U.S. government had to support the price, how would they do it? They would have to take gold and sell it into the market and buy dollars. We don't have any Forex reserves. Our reserves are gold.
We all know that job interviews can be scary, especially when you don't know what to expect. But what if you have an assistant who knows all the answers and always...
And if the U.S. government had to dump a bunch of Bitcoin on the market to prop up the dollar, the Bitcoin would crash even faster than the dollar. There's no way that Bitcoin could back up the dollar when the Bitcoin has even less value than the dollar. You need gold. Well, central banks have been buying gold for years now. They're accumulating gold. None of them are buying Bitcoin. All you got is El Salvador. That's the one country that owns Bitcoin. But all the real countries in the world are buying gold. All the big BRIC countries, they're not buying any Bitcoin, right? If Bitcoin was so great, why aren't the Chinese buying it? Why aren't the Russians buying it, right? Why aren't the Indians buying it? They're buying gold. They're not buying Bitcoin.
Yeah. So, David, I I agree with Peter is that gold's giving these governments credibility. It's giving something to back their future promises, all these deficits. And Bitcoin in the same way is if Bitcoin is the hardest money of all time and does turn out to demonetize a lot of the assets that are monetized today, and there only is 21 million, and the technology does continue to work for another 15 years, and it is the most performant asset for another 15 years, that the United States would want to back their deficits, their future promises, and it would give them a tremendous amount of credibility if they owned 5% of the future of money. And so it is a strategic reserve in the same way that countries strategically
but it may
gold.
not
It
be
gives
the
them
future of
credibility.
money. It may not be the future of anything. That you're just guessing. You're hoping, but you don't know. You don't know that it's gonna be around.
Yeah, but
you hope it will, but
Peter,
you have no idea.
Peter, us humans don't know the future of anything. The state of being human is the future is permanently uncertain. When I walked into my building today, I could have taken the stairs or the elevator. I made a calculated decision based on risk, market assessment, on which one was better for me. The stairs would have taken longer and I would have had to express more energy to get all the way up the stairs, but it probably would have been safer than a man-made machine. But everything in life is uncertain.
I don't know. You could have slipped on. You could have slipped on the stairs and fallen. You might.
100%. There you go. So maybe you would have made a different decision than me. But the point is, these arguments towards Bitcoin apply to gold, apply to an elevator, apply to stairs. It's the fact that we're speculating on the future of anything. That's absolutely the case for being human. Is that the past we cannot change, the future we don't know.
Yeah. Well, the U.S. government.
That's not an argument.
The government should not be speculating on what might be the future of money. We know what the past is, and that's gold. It has a long history of being money. And so that's a better bet, that it's going to be. They've had alchemists for centuries, trying to reinvent gold, and it never works. And this is just the latest iteration.
But again, Bitcoin's been the best performing asset for now 15 years. And so you are making a...
What is really annoying about this debate or these kind of debates is it doesn't have to be gold or Bitcoin or Bitcoin or silver. It can be gold and Bitcoin, silver and Bitcoin, gold and silver. You can have both. And the government is not talking about selling all of their gold to buy all of Bitcoin. They're still going to hold gold, and they should hold some Bitcoin too. It's probably a good decision.
But I'm about to explain, if you'd let me explain it. You're making a distinction between where you'd be comfortable in adopting Bitcoin versus others. It's
right.
At what point, Peter, if it's 16, 17 years, 18 years, the U.S. government is making a proposal and saying, we understand the technology, we understand its historical performance, we understand the scarcity, and we think it's strategically important for this country to have ownership. That's their assessment. If your assessment is different and you need more time to adopt something that's probably technologically better money, then that's your own.
Jack, Bitcoin has been the best performing asset for the small number of people who bought it 13 years ago. But for the people who bought it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, there are a lot of other assets that they could have bought that did much better than Bitcoin, right? So you have to go back to its inception in order to get this great track record. And as I said, even if in a year...
You don't have to go back to its inception. You just have to go back to the early years, not 1 or 2 years ago. But you don't have to go back to 13 years ago. You can go back to 8, 7, 6.
Bitcoin is down at 10,000, right? Which would be a 90% decline from its peak, right? Whatever that is. And where most people have been wiped out in Bitcoin, you'll still be able to say, well, over the last 18 years or 60, it's the best performing asset. That could, even if Bitcoin goes down to 100, it still could be the best performing asset if you go all the way back to the very first Satoshi that was ever minted, or Bitcoin, whatever. So you'll always have that frame of reference. But you have to acknowledge that we've had 3 years now where we haven't had a new high in gold, where the price of Bitcoin is down by 30%, despite massive marketing all around the world, hype to get people to buy all
Peter.
the institutional
God,
money
Jesus
that has
Christ.
come into Bitcoin, the nonstop advertising and promotion, and it's not going up.
But
so
Peter,
to me, it looks like it's topped out.
All right, let me
Well, hold on real quick, David. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
10 seconds.
Yeah.
So over the last year, annualized return for U.S. stocks, 10 to 15%, gold 5 to 8%, Bitcoin 50 to 70%. Over the last 13 years, Bitcoin has been the best performing asset, 10 of the last 13.
All right.
And that Bitcoin is some sort of Ponzi. People are going to sell off at one point. There's going to be a big market crash. That's what Peter said earlier. What would crash the Bitcoin market? Would it be a better digital currency better digital money? Would it be quantum computing, cracking the blockchain code and hacking the Bitcoin base layer? Would it be something else? Hypothetically, what would cause everyone to sell Bitcoin independent of other market movements? We know Bitcoin's been correlated to stocks.
This is hard.
I think that, if gold were able to achieve what it was set out to achieve, which is be the neutral global world reserve currency and money, then Bitcoin would have a slower adoption cycle. I still think it's superior technology. But what I mean by this is that I look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin to me equals technology plus fiat liquidity. And so if the fiat liquidity were to slow down because for whatever reason, government spending went way down, and that gold was able to break out of the censorship resistance and the centralized control of banks and governments and such, and that there was a more competitive world reserve currency, I think it would slow Bitcoin adoption down. I still don't think Bitcoin would necessarily go to zero, but it would make me rethink. Like, I'm on record saying I think Bitcoin hits 250,000 to 1 million on this show, David, at some point within the next 12 to 18 months. And that's my opinion based on currency debasement and the fact that gold is going to continue to underperform as a world reserve currency. So that would be my position. And if Bitcoin were to go to $100, $50, I think that would likely be, a catastrophic blow that would further set it back. And of course, if the technology,
yeah, okay,
but I don't know. I'm curious. I'm really curious Peter's answer to this, to be totally honest.
Yeah, well, same question. What would crash Bitcoin? But then I have a separate question for you, Peter. But please address that.
Oh, we already know what he's going to say. I can't listen to him. I'm sorry, guys. I can't listen to freaking Peter say this again.
Notes were backed by gold. They were redeemable in demand, payable to the bearer in gold. And up until 1971, even though
I can't do
just
it
as a trade, and I probably should have done it. I'm not that big a speculative.
Oh, there you go.
And so maybe when that does happen, Jack will change his view. But as far as what would get me to change my opinion on Bitcoin, I can't imagine that if nothing has changed my opinion yet, right? I've known about Bitcoin since it was, $1 or under $10 for sure. I forget exactly.
That's it. He's just freaking bitter. He's just bitter. He missed it. Even though he didn't miss it. You can still buy right now. Still a good time. But yeah, that's got to be why he's still holding on to this stubbornness so strongly.
Sometime in 2010, where it came on my radar, and I actually thought about buying it. But I've watched it, and I've seen it as an observer grow. And I know there was a time that I even thought about buying it just as a trade, and I probably should have done it. I'm not that big a speculative trader, not because I believed in it, because I saw a lot of people that were believing in it, and I thought it had the potential to go up, but I didn't know if I would get out in time, or I don't know. I just have a hard time knowingly participating in a bubble, even though you can make money doing that. But so yeah, can the price of Bitcoin go up? I don't think it could go to the numbers that Jack talked about. But could it go to 100,000? Could it go to 200,000? I doubt it would get to 200,000. Maybe you can get to 100,000. Although I think that if it was going to go there, it would have already gone there with all the hype that we've seen recently. But even if it
got there,
it's not exciting to me as an investor anymore, because it's 56,000 now. 100,000 isn't even a double. But, for the risk that it implodes, it's just not there. There are so many assets that I already own, speculative assets, that I think could go up 10 times, 20 times, with a lot less downside risk than Bitcoin. So for me, if I'm going to speculate, there's better bets to make than betting on a crowded trade like Bitcoin. So I don't know, the price going up isn't going to change my mind, although I do think there's a good chance that it's already topped out, right, in gold. And so, if it makes a new high, that might make me think that, well, maybe it's got another leg going, it could go up. But if Bitcoin, I've said this before, if Bitcoin actually becomes money, if I start traveling around and every place I go, prices are expressed in Satoshis. If people don't want my dollars or my euros, if they want to sell me a dinner in a restaurant and they just take Bitcoin, right? If Bitcoin is actually succeeding as money and driving out all the other inferior forms of money, Gresham's law, whatever, if everybody is just using Bitcoin and Bitcoin is the winner and prices are in Bitcoin. If, I can buy insurance policies and they have Bitcoin benefits, I pay my premiums in Bitcoin, I get my benefits. If rents are in Bitcoin, if everything is expressed in a quantity of Satoshis, then I guess I was wrong, right? You were right. Bitcoin actually became money and it replaced all the other currencies. But it's actually used less for that purpose than it was years and years ago. And in fact, even the Bitcoin proponents claim Peter, it's not going to be used as money. They claim it's just a store of value.
Okay, go ahead, Jack.
You can't store what you don't have.
I just want to ask a question because I agree with a lot of what you said in the sense that gold was good money up until 1971. Now, my opinion on that is because gold needs government, banks, central parties to achieve settlement and transaction finality. If you want to operate an economy with 8 billion people, with transactions on the internet, with money moving all over the world across borders, would you agree that that's where gold started to fail and wasn't meeting the expectations of the market? And if you are expecting gold to then regain monetary prominence, what gives you the confidence that it can achieve those things when it clearly failed before? What has changed?
Gold didn't fail. People failed. Governments failed. Gold is just a metal, right?
So is gold
the people
acting as...
failed.
Okay, well, let Peter answer.
The people failed to stay on a gold standard through governments. Because again, governments don't like a gold standard. It means you have to balance the budget. It means you can't buy votes anymore. You have to live within your means. No politician wants to do that. So the politicians were able to break free of the shackles that gold provided. Now, I think in this next currency crisis, when things are really bad and there's massive inflation and now you have price controls and shortages and black markets, there's going to be a movement to go back to gold because it's going to be the only way to restore confidence in a monetary system. But before that happens, the only reason that private companies don't provide an alternative is just because of the cost. And the main cost is government regulation. If you didn't have all these AML, KYC, all these laws, it would be very easy, very simple for gold to be reintroduced into the monetary system, and it would be adopted almost immediately by everybody. But governments are creating these barriers to that with regulations and putting people in jail if they try to use gold as money and stuff like that. But you're actually in a position, I wouldn't even mind talking to you about it, but you're in a position that you may be able to reintroduce gold as money. You might already have the infrastructure. You might already have some economies of scale and have the AML KYC to offer to your customers a gold money that they can use in commerce instead of dollars, euros, yen, that merchants can use, that they can price their products in, that they can receive payment in. I mean, most sellers of goods and services would prefer to get paid in gold. I mean, gold is a better way to get paid, especially as inflation really starts to pick up and you start to worry that if I sell these products and I take paper, what happens if...
That's not true at all. Most sellers don't know shit about the economy or money, and they just want to get the dollar because that's what's easy and that's what everyone uses.
The paper collapses and I can't even rebuy my inventory because the prices have gone up. So I think as inflation really becomes entrenched, merchants are going to look to accept real value in exchange for whatever goods or services they have to sell. And the best monetary instrument is gold.
Yeah,
okay, I'll let Jack close off.
I have another question. Yeah. I just have another follow-up to you then, Peter, because I agree with what you're saying. So is it correct for me to summarize that you're making the point that in a world, in an environment where governments and humans trust and respect each other unequivocally and always act fair, gold's a phenomenal monetary asset? Because
he never answered that previous question Jack asked though.
Therein lies what I think Bitcoin has achieved, is that despite parties that are enemies, parties that can't trust each other, parties that don't act totally fair, Bitcoin still retains the qualities and properties of money. That, in my opinion, is one of the core achievements that Bitcoin has developed and innovated on that gold hasn't. So is it fair to say that you believe gold is a great money, assuming that, human nature is to always be fair and equitable and honest, and that if humans and governments are ever dishonest, not fair, and don't act according to principles, that gold then is a failed money? Is that basically what you said?
No, that's not what I said. But I'm saying the government doesn't like competition. right? I mean, and so gold is competition for dollars or any other fiat currency. So the government tries to erect barriers to make it harder for the market to choose gold over the dollar, right? With respect to Bitcoin, Bitcoin really doesn't represent the type of competitive threat to the dollar that gold does. In fact, now I hear,
Wait, so if government doesn't like it, why would they let it work? Why would they let it work this time?
Michael Saylor is like, oh, the Bitcoin isn't a threat to the dollar. I mean, it's great. Bitcoin and the dollar are best buddies, right? They go hand in hand. The dollar is going to run on the Bitcoin blockchain or whatever the nonsense he's saying to justify his multi-million-dollar Bitcoin price target. But look, the government doesn't like free speech. They don't like privacy. They don't like any of our rights that are secured by the Constitution. That's why we secured them, because we know that the governments are going to try to abridge them. And so they don't want us to be able to choose the money that we want to use. And they want to use the fear of a terrorist. We have to have all these regulations because, we got to get the terrorists, right? Which is a tiny segment of the population. I mean, they're more concerned about tax evaders than they are about terrorists, but that doesn't, get as many votes or scare up the support for these bills. But they don't want people using an alternative form of money for all sorts of reasons. But it's going to happen, people now, a lot of people use Uber instead of local taxis. And that's, taxis were expensive because governments were granting monopolies, selling medallions. And so Uber came in and exploited that. FedEx and other delivery companies came in and undercut the post office for, shipments that they're allowed to compete in. And so, gold is better. The free market will provide better money than the government will create. And I think, it'll overcome these regulations globally, right? So it's going to happen. I just don't think that Bitcoin is what you think it is. I mean, it does have these interesting aspects of it, but it's not going to be able to succeed.
Are you admitting something there,
when
Peter?
the price does collapse, it's going to be very difficult, I believe, to rebrand that. It's like, for a lot of people, it's like you don't have a second chance at a first impression. You have a lot of people that are new to Bitcoin over the past few years that bought Bitcoin at 40,000, 50,000, 60,000, 70,000, who thought they were getting it rich, who were told they were getting in early and it was their ticket to, to the moon. And if it crashes to 20,000, 10,000, 5,000, those guys are gone for good. They're not gonna come back. They're gonna leave the casino for good. In fact, they may lawyer up and try to sue a lot of the people who were involved in the promotion of Bitcoin. I know that's coming. Whenever people lose.
Helen Hadsell was able to win any competition she took part in. She was known as the contest queen.
Lose a lot of money in America. The lawyers come in. And
that was a good conclusion.
Bitcoin's going to be no exception.
I let Peter start, so I'm going to let Jack close off. One final question for you, Jack. To Peter's point, when I go to McDonald's or any other store in my neighborhood, I don't use Bitcoin. They don't accept it. What could change that?
Just more technology being built to suit the needs of merchants. I just violently disagree that whatever a merchant accepts at their storefront is what's defined as the best way to store, save, and exchange your labor. That's just not like, it's not up to Papa John's how I should exchange my hard work and store it and further exchange it for the things I need in the marketplace. I don't really care what Papa John's wants to accept at their storefront. That's not how I make that decision. So I think it's just more technology to be built. I mean, more adoption, but I don't think that actually matters in the context of this conversation.
Fair enough. Peter, where can we learn more from you? Follow your work?
Well, I do my own podcast, the Peter Schiff Show podcast. It's on my YouTube channel. It's on schiffradio.com. I have various newsletters that I come out with. We have one at Schiff Gold. You can sign up for that one. I have a new publishing company, Schiff Sovereign. We have a daily free newsletter. Go to schiffsovereign.com, sign up for that. There's a premium letter as well. If you want to spend a little bit, you can get a lot more value there. But most importantly, if you want to buy some gold and silver as a substitute for cash, as a store of value, as a safe haven, as an inflation hedge, I would encourage you to do so at Schiff Gold. If you have Bitcoin, even if you're not convinced that I'm completely right, at least hedge your bets. Take something off the table. Don't go broke. With all your money on a risky investment. So maybe take some of your profits and put it into gold and silver, and just play with the house's money as far as your Bitcoin position. If you've got a more substantial portfolio, my main company is Euro Pacific Asset Management. We manage portfolios for individuals, separately managed accounts. Some of the strategies are focused on gold mining stocks. Others are just focused on good, solid value, dividend-paying stocks. I also own a mutual fund family with a number of funds that you could buy no load at any discount broker. As I mentioned earlier, if you really want to gamble on
we'll make sure to put those links in the description below. Jack, please tell us a little bit about your work, where we can follow you. Strike.
That's enough. I think Jack's really good. I think Jack's a smart young man, knows what's going on. Peter says the same thing he's been saying forever. So for me personally, I think you should hold both. I mean, I think you should hold Bitcoin. I think you should hold gold. I think you should hold silver. I think it's a good idea to have the hard money in the physical world and to have the hard money in the digital world as well. It doesn't have to be either or. Probably a good thing. It's just up to you whether you go 50-50 or you go 80% Bitcoin, 20% gold, or whatever your ratio would be. But it's a good idea to probably hold some of both. If you like what I'm doing, if you want to support the channel, I'll put a Bitcoin address down below you can send to. If you're into crypto beyond Bitcoin, you can check out my favorite meme coin, the most elegant monkey ever, ticker meme. I'm going to be putting out a video soon, or maybe I already did at this point, of why I'm so bullish on this token, but I'll put the token address down below if you're curious to check it out. Until the next video, stay elegant, everybody. See ya.